Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's nice to see you. Today I wanted to spend some time talking about tarot decks for beginners, my recommendations right from my deck collection, and chatting about what might work best for you if you're just starting out. So I have a lot to go through, so let's just hop right in. I do have a few notes here before you buy your first deck. And so the first one is that there are a lot of misconceptions about your first tarot deck and how it should be acquired. And that is that someone else should purchase the deck for you and give it to you as a gift. While this may have been an old tradition or something done long ago, I feel like it no longer holds its value in today's modern world. And I don't think it's necessary to start your journey with tarot because, on a personal note, if I hadn't purchased my own tarot deck, my first one myself, I would have never opened up the door for myself. And that's what I feel like we're doing here. We're opening the door for ourselves. Otherwise, I would have never ventured into tarot. I would just be still waiting for someone to give me my first deck. The second thing to note before buying is that all of these that I am sharing with you today are simply my own thoughts on what I think would suit a beginner the best, as I was once a beginner. I have included both mass market decks that are still being printed today and that are really easy to find, whether that's on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or, I don't know, online, anywhere really. And I have included indie decks too, because we all have different tastes. So I didn't want to limit it just to mass market because we know it's readily available and somewhat more price conscious. Nowadays, I think that both are quite an investment, no matter how you break it down. So it kind of comes down to your personal taste and what you're drawn to. And I didn't want to limit it to just one bucket of the industry because there are different buckets. So all to say, take what resonates with you and just leave the rest. The next thing to know is, before we get into tarot, I wanted to insert this little thought here. Let's talk about familiarizing yourself with cards in general. Whether that is with a playing card deck, like this one. This one is circular, just, you know, looking at them, playing with them, shuffling them, whatever it is, interacting with a deck. I think that there's some value in picking up a deck that you have nearby. Almost everyone has a playing card bridge deck in their home. Just pick it up and play with it and flip through them, interact with it. Shuffle them, spread them out, do some research on card reading history, because it really starts here with a bridge deck, playing cards. The next note is that what goes along with getting your first tarot deck is the supportive educational materials that go alongside it or are parallel to it. And yeah, you can pick up a deck and dive right in, and I encourage you to do what works best for you. But I found that it is really helpful to have some resources for you to have nearby as you go through your deck and interact with it and start learning. The book that I used frequently, and I always had at my side when I was first learning to read, I don't have it anymore, but I will pop an image up on the screen, and that was The Ultimate Guide to Tarot by Liz Dean. And it was an invaluable resource to have as I began my journey. It was almost like my tarot Bible in a way. And the way that Liz set it up, I think, was very straightforward. It still had all the bits and pieces, but the organization of it didn't feel too overwhelming. So that was really great resource for me as I was just getting started. But you don't need to purchase a supplemental book because there are many wonderful online resources. There's Lisa Pepez's Tarot with Training Wheels video series. That's really great. I think that would be an awesome place to start because you can hear someone talk about it. You can see what she's doing and do it along with her. There is like reference websites like biddytarot.com, labyrinthos.com, tarot.com, littleredtarot.com, thetarotguide.com, and ethany.com, just to kind of name a few. I know I breezed through those pretty fast, so I will list all of everything that I'm speaking of today. Side note, will be in the description below for easy access. And the last caveat before going ahead and buying a tarot deck is perhaps maybe you want to dip your toe into Oracle first. Oracle cards are a little bit more free-flowing in their structure than tarot is, and I think that would be a great starting point. This way you can get a handle on how cards feel in your hand. You can get a handle on shuffling, picking out a card, laying out cards in a spread, just exploring with Oracle. I think, I mean, it can't hurt. It can only help. I think it would give you a better foundation when you finally purchase your tarot deck. It gets you familiar with the concept of reading cards, how they interact with each other, which is very helpful to understand, especially if you're super new to the world of divination, as was I. I had no clue. Not that I didn't have a clue that tarot existed, because I did. I just didn't really think about it ever, or thought that it would be something that I wanted to do. So I was starting literally from zero like the fool. So with that all being said, let's get into the main portion of this video, and let's start with, if you want to go the classic route, then I would suggest starting with the RWS system of tarot. Just as there are so many options in every field possible, whether that's cars, food, clothing, tarot also has many options and divination systems to choose from. So the main ones are Marseille, Thoth, and the Rider-Waite-Smith, or RWS for short. Just for a little explanation, when I was first starting out, I was like, what is Rider-Waite-Smith? Like, what? I don't understand. So in the tarot world, a lot of the time, at least historically, and until recently, it was very common for the name of a tarot deck to be the creator's last name, or the publisher was in there, or the artist's last name, what have you. So Rider was the publisher of this deck back in 1909. Waite was the, I would say, creative director, especially as it pertains to the major arcana, which is 0 through 21. And then Smith is the artist. So Pamela Coleman Smith illustrated all of these cards. And just for some context, because it took me the longest time, everyone was using the acronym RWS, and I was like, what is that? But not only is RWS a system, it is also a tarot deck. So it is both in that regard. Just to note, I think that's important to say. But the three main systems, Marseille, Thoth, and Rider-Waite-Smith, or the RWS. And RWS, which is this deck here, is regarded as the best. I mean, everyone has their own opinion, so, but it is regarded as a good starting point because every single card is illustrated. There's a depiction going on, there's people interacting, there's something to look at. Whereas with Thoth pulls in a lot more esoteric things in its cards depictions, and there are layers and layers and layers to understand, but not to say that you can't start with Thoth. Maybe it's just the best to have everything in the kitchen sink thrown out there so you can focus on an aspect of the deck that you resonate with first and then dig in deeper as you go. And then the Marseille is just, especially with the numbered cards. So the numbered cards are also called pips. And so when we refer to pips, that is numbers ace through to 10. And with Marseille, they just depict, so for example, this person wouldn't be there, the tree, the grass, nothing, the hand. It would just be 4 cups arranged in some kind of pattern. So those are the, like, that is a crash course, high level overview of the 3 systems. But I'm going to be focusing on the RWS. And you can find a myriad of RWS deck clones on the market. When I say clones, what I mean are decks that follow the traditional RWS imagery, first illustrated here by Pamela Coleman Smith in 1909. But the clones change the colors or the outlines of the illustrations. There's a few things that are changed. Maybe there is a theme that carries throughout, like a winter theme or spring theme throughout all the cards. But there are a lot of clones available to you if this specific version of the RWS doesn't resonate with you. And don't feel bad about that, because a lot of people struggle to connect with the colors that are used in the RWS traditionally. Even this version that I have here is called the Centennial Weight because it was published on the 100th anniversary in celebration of this of the RWS, and they recolored it, so it is a little bit softer and muted than the original 1909 version. So each deck presented in this category is an RWS clone. But as I go through each of the decks after this one, they start to move a little bit farther and farther from the traditional imagery, Pixie or Pamela's imagery here. So let's go ahead and I'll show you the first option for a clone that I have in my collection, and that is the Nosotras Tarot. And this is an RWS clone that is very feminist in nature, but it still maintains all of the traditional symbolism that the original RWS has, except it brings in the lens of femininity, and all of the characters or people in this deck are female presenting. It's a little bit more diverse than the original RWS, but the way the people are posed, the way that they are depicted, still emulate the RWS, just with all female figures, and this is done in a collage style. The art is. The next RWS clone I have here is the Morgan Greer, and this is a very well-known clone. The Morgan Greer, it features all of the characters, but they're in a more up-close and intimate setting than the RWS. You're a lot more zoomed into the people, versus I believe the RWS explores a little bit more range when it comes to backgrounds and how close or far away the characters are in the scene. But with Morgan Greer, they're all pretty much very up close, and that's done on purpose. And it gives you just a little bit of a new perspective. It pulls in everything that you need to from the RWS, but it just zooms in a little bit. And of course, this deck is very 70s inspired with the coloring, with the people. You just feel like you're stepping back into the 70s. So that is the Morgan Greer. And these are the well-recognizable backs. The next clone that I have in my collection is Tarot de Carlotydes. Don't know if I'm saying that right, but this deck is made by Fournier. It's still in print. You can still find it. You can even find it secondhand on marketplaces if you wish. The really cool thing about Fournier decks is the size is a lot smaller. It's closer to bridge size. And I guess that's something I didn't touch on, but tarot cards are a lot longer and a bit more wide than a classic bridge size. So Fournier, as you can see, they print theirs a little bit on smaller cardstock, which if you have any kind of hand weakness, if you have small hands like me, if it's just hard for you to grip things and shuffle or anything like that, then Fournier decks are a lot smaller and easier to handle. And the cardstock isn't so thick that it's not flexible. So if you do choose to riffle shuffle, it'll give you a lot of flex and bend. So for that little side note there, this to me is a very whimsical, yet more, it's whimsical and a dreamy take on the tarot, especially, you know, the RWS. The symbols are here, it's just the artwork is more, the only word I can think of is whimsical. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of different colors, although it looks like, I guess maybe the cups are pink, swords are probably blue, wands look like green, and pentacles are like a tan beige brown. So there's some color coding to the different suits. But I think this is a really good option for someone who wants the RWS symbology and a similar layout, but doesn't necessarily connect with Pamela Coleman Smith's imagery or illustration. And then the last deck that I have here for this specific category is the World Spirit Tarot. There is a second edition of this deck, and if you are super brand new to tarot, there are multiple editions for decks sometimes. This is a deck that was originally created in the 90s by Lauren O'Leary, and this is called Lino Cut, and a really cool process. The reason I have chosen the World Spirit is that it is a more cultural view and presentation of the RWS. It features a lot more diversity, a lot more mythology. It feels well-traveled, feels like it's been across the globe like 80 times. This is a card that is depicting Pamela Coleman Smith. It's supposed to be her, so there's a nod to her in the deck. There is, as I was saying, and I tangented, wow, tongue twister. The edition I have here is the first edition, which is no longer in print, but the second edition I believe is still in print, and you can find it on Lauren O'Leary's. I believe she has an Etsy page. Some of the images have been changed or swapped out, but mostly the bulk of the deck has stayed the same. But if you want something that has more diversity, some mythology in it, something to, I don't know, that's just more well-traveled and worldly, this is the deck for you. Okay, so if you want to kind of go your own way or the more unconventional route, this is the group for you. And sometimes, no matter how much the classic may be a good place to start, it's not where all of us want to start or where it feels right to start. And that's completely okay. If that sounds like you, then these following decks are still good for beginners, but tend to kind of march to the beat of their own drum. And this category is great for those of you who need something that you are aesthetically more drawn to help you learn the tarot. Because sometimes, you know, this might be a good option, but if you aren't drawn to the cards, like the imagery, then you might not be as inclined to pick this deck up and actually learn it. So, for example, if you are an animal lover, or, I don't know, just love nature, then maybe an animal deck would suit you in learning the tarot. It's something you already love, you care deeply for animals, so why not pick an animal deck where you already resonate with one thing, and that's all the animals, and then you can just layer on the tarot on top. So for me in my collection right now, currently, I have, this is the Anima Mundi, which is a little bit more minimal as far as art-wise, especially in the numbered or the pip cards here. As you can see, there is still illustration to it. It's not just 5 swords duplicated and pasted in a pattern. However, it doesn't feature people because in the classic RWS, there are people in this card. So it gives you some breathing space as far as that. And in this deck in particular, there is only one card that features a human. Thank you, deck, and it's this one. So if you really connect with animals more than you do humans, if you just care about nature, anything of that sort, then this would be a good option. And then another more quirky option that I have in my collection is the Northern Animal Tarot. And this one brings, I can never say it right, but I think it's basically animals doing human things or exhibiting human-like behavior. I will learn how to say that word someday. But it's a lot more cutesy than the Anima Mundi. The Anima Mundi felt a little more serious because of the dark colors, the dark saturation. It's more lifelike as it relates to our world. But this deck, the Northern Animal deck, is very well loved in the tarot community. It has a huge following, and the reason why is it follows RWS. All of these figures here, these animals, are posed very similarly to what you will see in the classic RWS, but they're just really adorable animals. So whatever your thing might be, I just chose animals as a topic or a theme just to showcase that if you love animals, there are animal decks. If you love fantasy, there are fantasy decks, dragons, unicorns, anything you can think of. It now exists in the world of tarot, and you can find something to easily or more easily connect with. So I did just mention the Anima Mundi was a bit more minimal. And speaking of minimal and a little bit more modern, if the old style art doesn't really appeal to you, or maybe you get too overwhelmed with visual clutter, then a more minimal deck sounds like it might be your thing. And in my collection specifically, I have two here. I have the Small Spells Tarot, which I believe you can still find. I think it's still in print. And then I have Tarocchi by Mr. Friborn here, which some may argue is, it blends RWS and Marseille, but don't let that freak you out. It is more minimal. I think there's a lot to pick up on, but this one again feels a little bit more grown up and serious, whereas this one, it has a lot more whimsy and color. So these are, I mean, this one has more going on than this one, but both are still very streamlined and feature, I guess they're more pared down when you compare them with other decks out there on the market. And I mean, these aren't the only minimal decks out there. There's a slew of others that you can choose from as well. These are just the two that I happen to have in my collection. A really good minimal deck that is really good for a price, like for the price as well. It's called the Everyday Tarot, which features a minimal color palette. It sticks to only 3 colors. I think it's purple, gold, and yellow. Oh, right. No, that would be the gold. Like purple, yellow, and white, I think. And the illustrations are more on this end of things, where it's a little bit more dainty. It looks like it's drawn, I don't know, it's similar in vibe to this. It just has 3 colors instead of using a whole range of colors. So that is the minimal category. And if, like I mentioned earlier for the Anima Mundi, if you do not enjoy having people in your artwork, but you like having color, vibrancy, texture, then I would suggest this wonderful deck here called the Spacious Tarot. This deck also features a smaller sized card that is more closer to bridge size. The edges here do not come colored like that. When you buy it, it'll just be plain. I have colored the edges, so that's why it looks like that. But this deck has no people in it whatsoever, not even one card. It has 0. And the premise behind that is to give you space to interpret the meanings. They want you to feel like it's from your vantage point, like from your own eyeballs looking out into the world. This is what it would be to experience all of these cards firsthand if you were walking out in nature. But at the same time, even though this is a more minimal deck and it doesn't feature humans in it, it has a lot of vibrancy, a lot of color, a lot of texture to it. The artwork is beautiful, very well done. So I think sometimes when people think minimal, they think along the lines of the Small Spells Tarot that I just featured, where there's a lot of white space and, you know, very minimal actually drawn or going on. But this is minimal too. It's just a different type of minimal. So this is the Spacious Tarot, which I do believe is still available, and it is indie, so you will be paying a little bit more, and that is very typical in the industry. Usually when you have an independently made tarot deck, you're going to be paying independent style prices or boutique prices, if you will. And the final deck in this category I have is called the Sasuraibito Tarot, and this is a cult classic tarot. It's been around for, gosh, many years now, but it's still modern. It has pretty gilded edges. You can still find this available on the creator's Etsy page. If you just search Sasuraibito in the search bar, it'll come right up. So it is an indie deck, but it's still in print, which is really nice. You don't always come across that. And so this is modern. It has a lot of color, but it isn't It is and it isn't RWS. It's RWS in a new lens, in its own way, in its own right. The cardstock is really nice. The newer version of this will not have shiny, or as they call it, glossy cardstock. It will be more of a matte like this, so when you look at it, there's not really sheen. And this deck and this deck here were the very first tarot decks that I bought, and I wanted to buy them both at the same time for a reason. So I had one that was more what I thought was my style, and then I had the classic version to reference alongside of it. And you can do that too if you want. I mean, I think it's a good idea. But this deck has a very special place in my heart. It was the very first deck that I got alongside the Centennial, and on top of that, my first deck was also an indie deck. So I just hopped right in. I knew enough that I would get unhinged a little bit from like understanding, like when you're first starting out in tarot, I will say it's overwhelming and it can be very confusing. So let's take a look at the Six of Cups here. In this image, flowers are stemming from this person's chest here, and they are looking upwards, and you get a very good sense. You can intuitively feel like the joy and the happiness and the freedom that this person is feeling. But what I was having trouble with was putting it into context of the traditional tarot meaning. So let me take a second. I'm going to find the Six of Cups in this deck, and I will be right back so we can compare. We are back. So the Six of Cups in the classic RWS is depicted as two children here. The older, or what appears to be the older of the two, is sharing a cup filled with flowers and flora and fauna with this younger one, right? And the problem I was having when I was using this deck to read is that the Six of Cups in tarot is all about nostalgia and going back to a place that has fondness, that you have a memory about, that nostalgic feeling that we all have about something that we wish we could just live in forever because it's amazing. Now, knowing that meaning, I can pick this up here. After I would read the guidebook, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, two kids. I get it, kids, nostalgic. They're doing something, they're connecting, they're playing. That is very, like, play in general is something a kid would do. That's very nostalgic. But for this one, it's a little bit more to the wind than that, I think. It is this person's literal heart and soul as they're remembering something, right? Their head is up, tilted back, their eyes are closed. They're thinking of a memory. They're feeling that true emotion that comes from that. But unless I had understood the core meaning of the Six of Cups first, this image alone did not really depict that for me. So I ran into a couple scenarios like that. But having the classic RWS in tandem with this deck that visually spoke more to me than this one helped me to slow down, read the guidebook for this one, read the guidebook for this one, compare notes, and then I wrote down what keywords resonated with me the most from these definitions. So it made me slow down. I believe I was going too fast when I was first learning tarot because I just wanted to wake up the next day and know it. And if anyone knows tarot is this community right here. And they know that tarot is so much more multifaceted than that. You're not just going to memorize meanings and that's it. I mean, you can do that. If that's the way you want to read the tarot, nothing wrong with that. But there are more layers there for you to go down and explore if you so choose. And those layers only help support the foundation from where you learned. And it brings up new things. It brings up new meanings. It brings up new notes to write down, new ways of thinking, etc. So that was my little tangent on if you are going to go the route where it's a little bit more unconventional, I do still encourage you to find a copy of a classic RWS that maybe you don't hate as much, that you don't mind, and just using it for nothing else but a reference. So that when you start doing small readings, pulling a daily card, you can also pull that card from that deck and see the symbols in here, see how they might translate in here, even though this has no cups in it at all. Actually has flowers instead of cups, which is a symbol here, right? Because there's flowers in these cups. So these cups, or these flowers, are these cups, but we didn't know that unless we had this to compare to. Anywho, I digress. And let's move on to the final section of this video. So lastly, I wanted to talk about beginner decks that you may want to check out that I don't personally have in my collection, therefore I couldn't bring them out to show you. But as I talk about these decks, I will pop up a screenshot of the deck so you can get a visual with it as well and not just my hands here. So far, I've been recommending decks that I have in my collection so that I can physically show you the cards and the artwork. But here are a handful of decks that I think would be well suited for beginners that I don't currently own. The first grouping here is from the publisher US Game Systems. We have the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot. So the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot is only a couple years old, and it started out as an indie deck, and then it got picked up by the mass market publisher US Game Systems. And the artwork has a very dreamy quality to it. It has a very Art Nouveau, or I'm not really great with like I never took art history or anything, but it has that dreamy quality that comes from like an Art Nouveau. And it pays homage to the RWS. It is an RWS system, but the artist created the artwork to represent queer, non-binary, and trans identities. They were very passionate about doing that, so they brought that forward in this deck. And so if that's of interest to you, the Fyodor Pavlov Tarot is a great option, and it's so stunning. You're just going to fall in love with it. I know so. The next one is, well, I guess I could put in a caveat here of any cat deck ever, but if you like cats, there are probably hundreds, or it might feel like, of cat tarot decks out there. Literally one cat deck for every type of cat person ever. I mean it. But the one that caught my eye that I'm going to give a shout to in this video is called Caticorn Tarot. And yes, it does combine cats and unicorns, but you know what? Cat is first in the name. So the Caticorn Tarot, it is an RWS clone, but with super cute cats that are sometimes unicorns. And the next recommendation, I think, is a deck that goes under the radar a lot, because sometimes mass market decks do, because all of us, we kind of favor our good indie decks, right? But the Tarot of the Golden Wheel, I used to own this deck, but I lost it during a move, so I haven't repurchased it yet, but I need to. And it has stunning artwork with lots of vibrant watercolors, and it does stick to the RWS system, but it features a different culture. I believe it's Ukrainian or Russian culture, maybe. I have confirmed that the Tarot of the Golden Wheel is based on Russian culture. But it's very, very nice, and I highly recommend. I hope that the images I put up on screen really, they're just stunning. It's such a beautiful deck. Moving on, the next we have is the Afro Goddess Tarot, and oh yes, this deck is so gorgeous, and it includes a blend of ancient and modern symbolism, so you can be assured that all the symbols are there for you. And I have heard really great things about the guidebook, which guidebooks are super important for beginners. I just think that this is a really great option. I'm glad it's out there, and it has been on my wish list, so just to mention. The next publisher that I'm going to be featuring some decks is Llewellyn. Llewellyn sells wonderful decks that are suited for beginners. They come in these large boxes with, it's a kit, and it's a deck and it's like an actual book for a guidebook. And in my opinion, one of the best for beginners. I think it really holds their hand in a way that is supportive, but it features artwork that's a little bit more appealing than this might be to some. So the first one, oldie but a goodie, is the Llewellyn Tarot. Yes, titled by the company. And it is beautifully illustrated, and it's based in the Rider-Waite-Smith, the RWS. and it features imagery that is inspired by Welsh mythologies. The next one is Tarot of the Witch's Garden, and I wanted to highlight this deck because cottagecore is really trendy and popular right now, and it features cottagecore scenes, and it has a companion book, a big one, that is authored by Sasha Graham, she's a best-selling author, so kudos to her, and I think you'll find a lot of value in that guidebook. This deck, it claims to help cultivate personal intuition, and I'm glad they touch upon this because intuition is super vital when learning and reading the tarot. It's like the central part of tarot. And then the last two I'm going to put in tandem here because they're very well known, they're very well loved. They have a cult following for a specific reason, and that is the Green Witch Tarot and the Everyday Witch Tarot. And they are RWS clones, but they are done in a modern and witchy way. So that if that's kind of your vibe, go for it. I used to own the Everyday Witch and the Green Witch, so I used to own both. And the Everyday Witch Tarot was very key to the very beginning of my journey. I was drawn to it, using it more and more, just because the guidebook is beautifully written. It feels like it's written for beginners. And because of that, I felt like I was being hugged because no one talks about this part of tarot, I don't think, or I just haven't heard it anywhere, but it can be extremely frustrating to first learn tarot because, like I mentioned before or earlier in the video, we just want to wake up and the next day and know all the meanings because we want to get started in reading it. But the learning part, the very beginning, is super important. And if I had anyone in real life that I could have gone to for comfort while learning it, I would have. But I didn't have that, and I don't have that outside of my partner. He's very supportive, but he doesn't have interest in tarot. He doesn't study it. He doesn't know it like I do. So I was really, I have no one in my real life that I could go to and vent to about the frustrations of tarot or blah, 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 But this book and this kit felt like a huge hug from someone who would have been in my life to do that. With that being said, there you have it. Beginner-friendly decks that cover the gamut of art styles, of colors, of themes. Most of all, I know I spoke about the frustrating part of learning something new, and I don't think it's just tied to tarot. I think it's anything. Anything that you try to learn, you will have some frustrations with. But most of all, try to have fun. And if I could give you one last tip, is take your time. Do not rush it as much as you want to. As much as you want to go out and buy all of the cool, fun decks that there are, take your time, be choosy, go to a Barnes & Noble, browse the selection that they have, or better yet, find a local metaphysical shop near you because they are always a great and helpful resource. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please remember to give me a like and subscribe if you liked this video and you want to see more from me. And until next time, see you around.